Hello, welcome to today's devotional. Hope you have a good day. We're in Proverbs chapter 9, verse 6 today. Proverbs chapter 9, verse 6 comes as we've been working our way down through this chapter. It comes as a part of a statement that the personification of wisdom is making. So the book is treating wisdom as though she were a woman calling out to us to come into her house and have a meal with her and to stay with her in her house. So it's like the next step in the marriage that a person's supposed to have with wisdom. The last part of the chapter shows the foolish woman, and she's also calling out for people to come and stay with her. And the idea is we choose which one we're going to go with. Are we going to go into wisdom's house, or are we going to go into foolishness house? And so that's the idea. So verse 6 is wisdom still speaking out, calling people in for the meal that she's prepared. So it says this. Verse 6 says, "Forsake your folly and live, and proceed in the way of understanding." Now she's saying other things too, but that's the key for today's verse that we're going to look at is forsake your folly and live, and proceed in the way of understanding. Now, what I want to draw out of this devotional today is this idea of forsaking folly. And why is it that humans are so bad at changing course? We don't like to change course. We're really funny about it. Now, there's some things, obviously, some trivial things that we can change course on quickly. Sometimes people are very here and there. They're double-minded on things or very spontaneous, and there's that stuff. But there is a general sense of when I'm invested in some course of action, I'm on some journey or in something that I don't want to change. And even when there's good reason to change, I still don't want to change. Or even when there's like extremely good reason, I still don't want to change. Now, a simple example would be the compulsiveness of any human to count something, right? Like I want to go from 1 to 2, and I want to go from 2 to 3, and there's that. If you start out singing the song "99 bottles of beer on the wall," you're gonna want to work all the way down to number 1. There's that kind of compulsiveness. We're not just talking about that. I'm talking about when we have a sense that there's something I've, so to speak, invested in. And since I've invested in that, I don't want to change. And that sense of investment can come in all sorts of different ways. Like we can feel it because we've actually literally put money into something. So you buy a car, for instance, and you've had this car for a while, and you've been paying on it each month, perhaps, or something, and it has a problem, and you get it fixed, and it has another problem, and you get it fixed, and has another problem, and you start to realize, man, this car has nothing but problems, and yet you're thinking, but I've put so much money into it, or I purchased it for this much money, and I should get this many more years out of it. So I can't just throw this car away. I've got to get my money back out of it. And so you keep with the car, and it keeps having problems. You keep having to put more money into it because it's a lemon. It's a terrible car. And rather than just cutting your losses and saying, this isn't worth it. I know I spent a lot of money on this, but it's not worth it. There's this need to have your investment not have been in vain. And so people make the terrible decision of keeping it. That's this weird example, but it's one I personally struggled with when I was a young man. I had a car, and it was a similar problem. And what was a good friend of mine said, this car doesn't really owe you anything in the future. Like it's just move on. And it's like but we're like that. We have a hard time with moving out of something that we think we have, that we kind of invested in, right? And it kind of comes in 4 areas. Like we hate to admit we're wrong. So if we make a mistake on something, we really hate to admit we're wrong. And a lot of people will really invest in trying to prove that I'm right and get increasingly stubborn about being right, even to the point when they finally know inside themselves that they're wrong, but they're going to just keep pushing into the right anyways because they don't want to be wrong. That's a real example. That we hate not completing the investment of time and money. As I mentioned with the car, we hate to learn new habits. I mean, it's so hard to learn a habit. It's easy if it's something that's just very, very satisfying in some way. But to learn a good habit, boy, we hate that. To break a bad habit, it's even harder. And but that's what we're like. And we also have this sense in us. We don't like to be inconsistent. There's something in the human psyche that if I say that my favorite color is red, then that's my favorite color. Even if as life goes on and I slowly start to think, I really think I like blue better than red, we really kind of don't want to have to say that my favorite color is now blue because it's been red for so many years, and we don't like to be inconsistent, and so and for good reason. But when there comes a time that we need to change and forsake something, you have to be able to do that. But we don't. We find it hard. And all that to say, verse 6 says, "Forsake your folly and live." Forsake it. And the idea of forsaking is you have invested in, you have been in this place, you have lived this way, this has been your habit, this is what you've invested in, but it's foolishness. You need to forsake it and choose instead to pursue a different course of life, a different worldview, the way of wisdom, the way that God has taught us. And that requires a forsaking of the way we used to live before. But that's hard to do. People don't want to do it. And we rather double down in foolishness because if I admit that I was foolish and something bad happens in my mind, I guess. But it's a real thing. We can only overcome that in our lives by four. I'm going to give you four things, but by basically an attitude of humility that says, okay, I'm not going to think of myself as higher than I should. I'm going to think of myself, at a very reasonable, meek level. And if I will do that and force myself into a humble state of mind, then it will help with the ability to say, I was wrong. Like I can admit I made a mistake, or that wasn't a good investment. And so that means I can forsake the path of foolishness and enter the path of wisdom, because I'm not investing my personal worth in this. I'm instead wanting to be a better person or whatever. And so humility. Another one is sacrifice, the ability to sacrifice. This isn't a popular thought, but it's a really good thing to learn, is the ability to sacrifice for a good cause, not to just throw things away. That would be foolish, but to sacrifice something for a better thing. That's a good skill to learn, and it's a very hard skill to learn, but it's a really good skill to learn. I can give up this thing that has become important to me because I know there is a better result for giving up this thing. It's worth it to give it up for this other reason. That ability to sacrifice. We do it in simple things, like I will sacrifice a certain amount of hours of every day so that I can get a paycheck. I will give those hours to an employer so that I can get a paycheck, and so I will sacrifice that time to that person. But that's not easy to do. But it's a great skill to learn, because when it comes to foolishness and wisdom, we need to be able to sacrifice the things that foolishness will tell you to keep, so that we can follow the road of wisdom. Or the ability to discipline myself to do something that I don't necessarily want to do. Well, that means I forsake the pleasure in order to be able to do the better thing. And finally, just repentance, learning the ability, the Christian principle of repentance, really important principle, the ability to admit wrong, to admit error, to admit a bad investment. And even though it makes me seem inconsistent, to not just be waffling back and forth, but rather to admit that was wrong, I was wrong, and now I choose a new way. So red was my favorite color, but it's not anymore. I have changed my mind. I now realize blue is a way better color. No, I know that sounds silly, but just to make the point, the ability to recognize and change course is wisdom. Not to do it frivolously, but to do it properly is wisdom. So the problem with the inability to forsake things is what gets people in trouble. When you think of things like, a disaster is coming and there's an evacuation, but somebody's like, I've been living here for 25 years. I'm not leaving just because of a hurricane or a tsunami or a forest fire. Like, why not? Why would you not? Why would you give up your life for this house you've lived in? Like, I know it hurts, it's painful, I get it, but you're gonna die. Like, but that's what happens. We're not able to forsake something, or I have to keep on with this habit of smoking or bad diet because that's just what makes me happy. And I know it'll kill me someday, but right, it'll kill you someday, but you can't forsake it. We need to be able to forsake things. Now, we need not to be people who forsake things trivially. The Bible talks about the importance of faithfulness, the ability to carry through and to be consistent and to be persevering. But the key is not whether you're a person who is persevering at anything, but is persevering in the right things and forsaking the wrong things. So it's definitely about choice, a good choice. But we need to be able to forsake the bad choices, foolishness, so that we can live and instead proceed in the way of understanding. And that proceeding in the way of understanding means faithfully never forsaking the way of understanding. That's verse 6. Hope that's useful to you. God bless. Next time we'll go to verse 7. I hope you have a great day and keep pursuing wisdom.